a story that I've been on since 2009 when I pivoted from a startup called WikiTube TV because it was value validated by YouTube. Pretty much they took and used a lot of what I had been working on for YouTube Red, even the layout. I was the first one with the bottom videos across the bottom screen. It's really my trademark. But I had no money to fight them or to go against them, or I lived in rural Japan and I was upset. And I said to myself, is the startup broken? If so, how would I fix it? And I started really looking at the startup and trying to understand the startup. When I discovered there's three kinds of startup. There is the pre-seed startup, means it has no angel investors. You have your own money, you're trying to launch it, and over 99% of those fail, okay? Then there's the seed startups. There you have angel investors, and usually it's, over 500,000 on up to about 2-3 million to get it going. And 90% of those fail, all right? And then there's the VC-backed startup, Series A, B, C, right? The EFG, HIJK, right? They have access to closed capital networks. And 75% of those fail. They fail to scale. They fail to cross the chasm, right? Or one fails to scale, one fails to cross the chasm, and the other one fails to fund. So most of them fail to fund. You just don't have the money, can't continue, right? So I said there must be a better way, and I started working on this idea of different things, kind of community launching and everything else, and looking at Bitcoin, which caught my kind of imagination. And for 10 years, I've basically been working on this idea that if we're going to save our planet, if we're going to bring about the kind of change we want, we have to change the startup. The startup is the engine that drives capitalism. And unless we transform it into something new, there is no change. And we can throw all the solutions we want to all these problems, but ultimately it is the startup that's generating them. Every crisis, barring a very few, can be traced directly and indirectly to our business model built on startups. And it comes down to this insatiable appetite that it has, which is success, which is CAGR, compounded annual growth rate. And this CAGR ultimately drives ROI, and this ROI drives investment, and so on. So I realized that we need to change CAGR. The problem is, you can go to Wall Street. So I reached out to the founders of Bitcoin Magazine, which went on to launch Ethereum, and I explained to them this whole idea of a decentralized way to launch with tokenization, and ultimately one built a new sandbox, right, where the code can be changed. And I didn't know what CAGR was back then, but obviously I had an impact because they launched Ethereum a couple of years later. OIF, the Open Startup Innovation Framework, existed. However, it was new and it needed building and growing and everything else, and needed time. So in 2016, when it was hacked, the DAO is, I'm the true father of the DAO, right? The DAO is open corporations, open organizations built on, AI, where they downplayed to smart contracts. So at that point, I rallied a team and tried to get things going. Went to DEFCON 2, ended up being flown to South Africa with a $5 million pledge from Brendan Kersner. I had, offers from Alinga Tahid and Chandler Gao, Chinese guy, big Bitcoin guy. But ultimately I turned them all down, mainly because, it meant me signing over everything and giving up control, and, being a control, having learned from Steve Jobs and what went down there, I decided to keep moving. And incidentally, what happened was my father ended up breaking his hip in 2017. And had I basically taken the money, my dad would have died alone in a hospital, because I'd have been so busy with Found Ups. So I spent 3 years taking care of him. And ultimately, he passed away last year. I figured, well, I raised, uh, 5 million last time at DEF CON. I'll throw 3 big events and, I'll raise 100 million. Well, I just spent 5 Bitcoin and didn't raise anything. So ultimately, I was kind of like, okay, it forced me to go back to basics. And this is now I get to be the next Bitcoin, right? So I'm here in Florida. I decide to launch this Found Up Hemp, and Found Up Hemp is, go back to basics. Let's launch a Found Up. Well, my friend has a CBD farm, has hemp farm, so I have product to launch and everything else. And I start walking the walk, talking the talk. And I'm finding that I'm, moving products at a flea market. And I hadn't been to a flea market in a long time, but if you ever go to a flea market and a craft show, it's literally hundreds of people with their own creations. Soap, you name it, they have their own creation. And I started wondering, these are the people that we need to have tokenized. It is these individuals that are the next Burt Bees. These individuals, this is where the next big product is, and they're just waiting to happen. And what if, because if you look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin has a track record of going from nothing to significant. What it is that gave that value? What gave that value is really the collaborators early on, right? Which built the network and also created the the community. But Bitcoin isn't being used. It's just a store of value. That's it. But think of Burt Bees. Think of a guy called Steve Jobs in a thing. Think of Michael Dell in his dorm. Think of Amazon. All of these huge companies today all started off as ideas in someone's head, in someone's room, and it was traction. The other thing that made me realize too is that we're losing community. And what about a tokenization system that you can only get from the creator, and the creator appoints collaborators, and ultimately, if you can't get the consumers consuming, buying, right, then ultimately you go nowhere. So there's this 3 class. So I imagine this world where, like you're going down to a fairground and you're seeing the Found Up token, right? You're seeing that logo. That logo means it's tokenized. And imagine now that you can start gaining a token from the favorite things that you're consuming locally, the local farmers market, the local honey, and everything else is going to be tokenized. And as that honey token, right? It's that local honey token. So imagine the local honey token becoming, all over the world, where every local beekeeper is sharing in this local honey token and creating the local honey token network. The Ganj token isn't my token. It is the Ganj token. So everyone who is basically selling Ganj can add the token to their system and share in the pool. Okay. So the framework for what I've set up is actually really, really simple. And the cool thing is that this tokenization system can exist on any blockchain, right? Any blockchain. And, by building out something like Chainlink and other similar layers, right? All of a sudden you have a ubiquitous tokenization that is on everything. And it can't be closed down. It's not centralized in any way. No one owns it. It's just set up there, and it's dripping pools of tokens that we're collecting. And the way that I see the token that is going to launch is that the only way to get the token is for you to go and meet a founder and scan his token, because initially it'll be him like, oh yeah, scan it. And it's always going to change. When you scan it, it's going to pull up a new one, right? And it's unlikely that the creators, right? So creators create creators. So there's a level of control. So you're not just putting it out there for someone to get it and kind of hack it and try to abuse it. It's like it's a viral. It's kind of, and it's built very much like like Gmail was launched. So I imagine people coming down to Florida to get the FoundUp tokens that I'm going to be launching at the fairs, right? Or coming to Puerto Rico and having an event there. I'd like to have an event there for the 100 by 100. So FoundUp's 100 by 100, 100 creators. These are creators. These are do creators that are ultimately going to tokenize 100 widgets, FoundUps, right? Now, these as these tokens grow, they actually become part of what's known as a DANO, a decentralized autonomous nonprofit organization. So these tokens ultimately will seed these DANOs, and these DANOs are these global cooperatives that will start, in very distinct areas, and then they kind of grow up and become one thing because their borders all kind of mush together, and everyone in these cooperatives get one vote. And people in these cooperatives select their delegates. There is no centralized token again behind them. It's all decentralized. So it's taken me 10 years to figure out the chicken to lay the egg, right? And it turns out that Bitcoin had it all along, and I just need to look at it. So this is kind of a long, video and talk with a lot of history at the beginning, because the journey is important. The journey on kind of how, and it's funny because I look back at my old videos and, I was kind of focused on another area and everything else. And it took, failure is so important, right? Because failure, we learn. And the failure in Osaka, trying to get that launch, bring me here, back to the basics, launching the first FoundUps, and then just understanding it. So if you're interested in being one of the creators, if you're interested in helping code this out, right? This is open source, and I'm sharing it because ultimately this tokenization system is not exclusive to any one blockchain, right? And I'm reaching out to any developers or anyone from other blockchains that want to come together and help build this. Because very quickly, we will literally have millions of tokens that all have the potential to be the next Bitcoin. And the individuals that that help launch these, who are passionate about this widget, this FoundUp, we'll have a UBI, I believe, in 10 years, and it's kind of fun. You become kind of a token collector, right? Running around collecting the tokens, because until they become like a division, they have divisions. There's 7 divisions of the token. So at division 7, they're worth nothing. At division 1, they're worth a penny to $1, right? They're division 3, and so on and so on and so on, all the way to division 1. Bitcoin is between division 1, division 2. Division 1 is over $10,000. And if you think about what is driving the value of Bitcoin, and you say to yourself, well, why wouldn't Burt Bees, or why wouldn't my Apple computer token, and so on and so on, why wouldn't that have value now too? And imagine that these tokens can be interchanged and swapped out in their own form of exchange. So if I have tokens, I can actually share tokens with other people. So so the level of it's kind of like a collecting a token that may be worth something, supporting the local creators in your community, and using as a way to drive people out to buy. Because I can see it like with the hemp token, they're going to build up overnight. So when the store opens, people are going to show up to get the hemp, to get the Ganj token, the FoundUp Ganj token. So anyway, thanks for watching. I'm going to go to bed now, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Andau.